Imagine this. I, a stranger, walk up to you on the street. I offer you a wonderful opportunity to come see Ed Sheeran for only $2. What would you say to something like that? Now, some of you might be wondering, Ed Sheeran, who's that? Well, actually, he's the actor best known for this scene.
It's a pretty song. I've never heard it before.
It's a new one.
So, what would your reaction be if I were to offer you this amazing opportunity? You'd probably be running the other way or thinking that I might be trying to take advantage of you or doing something horrible. It's obviously a scam or a trap, right? Why would Ed Sheeran, again, the famous Game of Thrones actor, why would he be actually available for somebody to view for only $2? That doesn't make any sense. Well, that's because if you price it too low, people will just think it's junk. Too high, and nobody buys it. How then do you find the perfect price that people will happily pay and still get you a healthy profit? In this video, I'm going to show you the exact data-driven formula so that you can set the perfect price for your paid community. You can make it easy to attract paid members, safe, and avoid costly mistakes, and ensure that you keep 80% of your profits consistently. All right, let's dive in to using this special pricing method so that you can almost read your audience's mind. This is going to let us tackle pricing from the customer perspective. Instead of guessing what they'd pay, we just ask them, but in a smart way. There's a famous pricing survey called the Van Westendorp's Price Sensitivity Meter. Don't let the name scare you. It's not a scary movie villain. It is actually just the key that you need to unlock the best pricing possible for your community. And it boils down to 4 simple questions that you can ask your audience and gauge their price perception. The first one is going to be, what's overpriced? A high price that could just be seen as a ripoff. At what point would your community be so expensive that you would not even consider joining? Somebody might say, whoa, no way I'd pay something like that. Then you have suspiciously cheap. This is so low that people will doubt the quality and authenticity of what you are talking about. People thinking something is probably off about this. It's suspiciously low and maybe not worth anything at all. Then you have premium pricing. At what price does this start to feel expensive, but maybe you would still consider it? It could justify the premium pricing in your strategy. And then, of course, you have the bargain deal. At what price would you consider this to be extraordinary? A bargain for what you're getting with all of the value that's there. Some people might even call this a steal. Now, the difference here is that you're not going to choose just one of these 4 prices. You're going to use this to actually track what is going to be the best price for you. So in other words, we're going to be setting boundaries. When people think it's too cheap or too expensive, what point do they consider it to be a really great bargain or way too expensive? These questions are gold for you. And they're gold because they're going to give us a range of acceptable prices in the mind of your specific target audience. By the way, you can do this very easily. I'm going to link to you some forms. There's some Excel spreadsheets as well that you could use. And you could also just make up your own Google form or type form to send to your email list or social followers. You don't have to have a huge giant sample for this, even 20 to 30 responses, especially from those engaged followers who are, again, willing to pay or are already paying you. This can be super insightful for a small community launch. Now, let's take a look at this actual image. You can see here that while this looks, again, quite scary, but there's things here where you are tracking the red line saying things are too cheap. Maybe there's also this orange line where things are cheap enough, but there's this barrier in the middle. Once you have the answer to all of these questions here, this is what you're going to do. Chart them on a graph and create your own version of this model. You basically want to plot the percentage of people who gave each answer or below or above it. If that sounds complicated, don't worry. The idea of it is actually quite simple. You'll just get 4 curves on a graph that represent each of these questions that we talked about. Where these lines intersect, that's the magic. I'll include all of the resources and the links again so that you can see all this stuff. And there's even a totally free online tool that an awesome member on school.com actually provided that requires no signups. You don't even have to put in your email address to do this. Now, take a look at this price sensitivity graph from this survey. The x-axis equals price. The y-axis is the percentage of respondents. And each of these colored lines represents one of the questions that we talked about. Now, notice the gray shaded area in the middle. That's the acceptable price range in this example. That's roughly between 500 to 1200 that you can see on this chart. Everything to the left of that range, people felt the price was just way too low to be credible. Everything to the right, people felt it was too high to consider. So let me show you a real world example of what too low to be credible actually looks like.
Took one of the world's biggest performing artists, kept all his clothes on, and set up an Ed Sheeran peep show. Would anyone dare to believe what was written outside and come into our very dodgy looking venue?
That's right. Infamous Australian comedy duo Hamish and Andy unknowingly did a bit where they tested out part of the Van Westendorp's pricing model. And don't worry, I'll link the full clip in the comments for you, but let's do some show and tell about the fascinating results that they uncovered.
Do you think we'll get anyone?
I don't think we'll get anyone. It's going to be a brave soul.
I wouldn't come into, if there was a dude with a beard with a hat and saying, like, come in and see this.
Ed was right. This was going to be tough.
You want to peep at Ed Sheeran for $2?
As you can see, despite trying over and over again, people wouldn't really take them up on the offer. Poor Ed had to take a break from Game of Thrones to sit on that wooden stool all day. Stick around though, because near the end of the video, I'm going to show you if they cracked the code on their pricing or their strategy or both. Now let's go back to that model. When we're reviewing it here, you can see this sweet spot is the middle of that range. In this case, it's going to be around $700 per person in the example of that pricing model that you're seeing now. That point is often called the optimum price point, the OPP. Basically, that's the number of people that say too expensive equals the number of people saying it's too cheap. That's essentially the price where you're minimizing objections on both sides. A lot of folks could consider that the ideal price to charge. And again, it's really best for these high ticket offers where you're going to be charging generally more than $500 for it. But there's two other points on that graph that also matter. The point of marginal cheapness, also known as the PMC, that's the lower bound of the acceptable range, i.e. where a $2 Ed Sheeran show is clearly too low, maybe a $50 one might make more sense. Then you have the PME, or the point of marginal expensiveness. That's the upper bound of the range. And between the PMC and the PME, that is your acceptable price. People will be relatively okay with the prices that are in this zone. You're never going to be able to make everybody happy, but it's a good way for you to start. And within that, there is going to be that optimal price point. That's a great candidate for you to begin your testing. And again, you always want to be testing this because it'll upset the fewest people on either side. But let's take a look at this price perception analysis so that you can see over here, you've got the low price. Over here, you've got the high one. And then you have positive perception. Let's put this into context with a simple example with you as the creator. Let's suppose that you surveyed your audience and the results showed at $500 a month, almost everybody said, no way, way too expensive. At $50 a month, many people said, that might be a little bit too cheap. Is it going to be any good? At $200 a month, people said, that's a bargain. That's really cheap considering all of the value that you're getting here. But at $300 a month, some people said, hey, that's a bit pricey, but it might still be worth it. From this hypothetical survey, maybe the point of marginal cheapness comes out to be around 150. Below that, people just think it's way too cheap. And the point of marginal expensiveness might be around 400. Beyond that, most think it's too expensive. That means that the audience's comfortable range is around $150 to $400, and perhaps the optimal price point ends up being around $250 to $300. That'll meet the barrier between too cheap and too expensive to balance out. Boom! Now you have a data-backed pricing window. As Hamish and Andy found out, though, with the wrong price, it's going to take you a lot of effort just to learn that you got it wrong.
On a stool in there, you want him? $2. $2 for a peep. Think about it. It's actually pretty good value.
Despite trying, we'd had a total lack of interest for over 50 minutes.
It's been some time. We should have got you a more comfy chair, I think.
Yeah, I'm all right.
So at this point, you've got two puzzle pieces for finding that winning price. You need to price for 80% margin, as we mentioned from our first video. Check it out here if you haven't seen it yet. In that example, we figured out that if you had a $5 cost per member, you'd want to charge at least $25 a month for that to be able to be an 80% profit margin. You also now have the price range that your audience will accept. And in our hypothetical, That was between 150 to 400 with an optimal price point of around 250. The last step is to overlay all of these and choose a price. Ideally, you want to charge at or near the optimal price point from the survey provided. It's your margin floor. In this example, the audience's optimal price point was around 250, which matches that 80% target. That's a green light for you to go. You can confidently price your community at 250 a month because you know, A, it covers the costs with room to spare, and you get a healthy amount of profit on each member. B, your audience doesn't find it too expensive on average, so it's in that right sweet spot range. And C, you're not underpricing and leaving money on the table or cheapening the value that you have. Let's say, though, that the numbers don't align. Let's say that your cost per members were a bit higher, maybe like $15, and that means that you need to charge, in this example, for an 80% margin, $75. But your audience survey says that they only accept $30 before they're freaking out a little bit. That's a problem, but it's only a problem if you charge $30 with 15 of costs. Your margin would be 15%, which is way under our goal. This next part is crucial, so hear me out. Either you need to reduce your costs and offer a leaner service, find cheaper software, etc., or you need to increase the perceived value so that people are willing to pay more. Add exclusive content, one-on-one access, anything that can justify a higher price for them reasonably and ethically. Or you could just accept a lower margin, but that's not ideal for the long term, and it will signal that you have to tweak your model before you launch it big. Otherwise, you'll end up on the side of the street begging people to come in.
You want to peep at Ed Sheeran for $2? Insurance? Do you want to peep at Ed Sheeran? Your loss. What do you reckon, big fella? Got Ed Sheeran in here. Beautiful ginger head man, sitting on a stool. What do you reckon? $2. Got Ed Sheeran just sitting on a stool in there. You want him? $2. $2 for a peep. Think about it. It's actually pretty good value.
After seeing how much these comedians are struggling, what if your audience is willing to pay a lot more than you expected? Suppose the costs are only $5, the margin price floor being $25, but survey indicates that people would pay between $50 or even $80. Let's say you're delivering something of really great value or targeting a higher income niche. That's great news. You could potentially price higher than $25 and still be within that acceptable range. In that case, you might choose a price closer to the upper end. Maybe that's $40 or $50. That way you maximize revenue while still being underneath that too expensive threshold. This means higher profit per member, which you can invest back into making the community amazing or just enjoy as extra income for yourself. The data might even show an optimal price point that's above the minimum you were thinking. Feel confident. Go for it. Now, you also want to make sure that you pilot test your pricing. Before you roll out your community to the world at your decided price, I highly recommend running a pilot or a beta test. Why? Because theory is theory and reality can be very different, as our comedian friends Hamish and Andy have shared with us. A pilot is like a soft launch to a small group. You want to go out on the street, validate everything with strangers. Not only your pricing, but you want to validate your about page, your onboarding process, content delivery, your engagement methods, the whole experience. But let's just focus on pricing right here for this video, because those are all a bunch of other jam-packed video ideas. Select a small group of your followers, let's say at least 10, at most 30, and make them your founding members. If you don't have an audience, that's okay, but you should absolutely be focused on building up that initial 10 people. Use early access as a way to grow your community, and you have two different options here. The first one is that you charge them the price that you originally decided. And let's say for this example, that's $250 a month. This truly tests if people will rip out their credit card for that amount. If you fill those spots quickly and people don't object, hey, that's a great sign. If you hear crickets, though, or get lots of I can't afford that kind of feedback, that's a sign that you might need to adjust down or double check that you're targeting the right audience for the people who took your survey. Sometimes eager survey respondents aren't the ones balking at the price. Now, alternatively, number two, you could give a slight discount to early members as a reward for helping you shape the community. For example, founding members get in at $80 a month, which is 20% off that normal $100 price that you might be thinking of. This can entice people to join while still validating that they'd pay something close to your target price. The downside, though, is that you're not testing that full price. The upside is that you get to get people in the door to generate feedback. You can also be transparent and say, hey guys, this is a beta price. It's going to go up for new members later. Many people will understand and appreciate locking in that early deal. That initial group will also help you significantly with lowering your churn, because when they do try to cancel in a program like school, it will actually show them, hey, if you cancel now, you're going to be missing out because the new price is X. During the pilot, pay attention to and specifically look for feedback related to your price. You might ask your beta group questions like, hey guys, do you feel this community is worth what you paid for it? Would you pay this amount again next month? Would you pay this every year? If people are loving the content and engagement and nobody's complaining about the price, awesome. You were probably spot on. If, on the other hand, half of your beta members are saying, hey, I'm not sure this is worth the money, then either you need to add more value or consider if the price is a touch too high. On the flip side, if people are saying, honestly, I'd pay more for this, that's a golden signal for you that you might have more room to raise the price in the full launch or in future cohorts. Now, one of the things that you're going to want to really pay attention to is refining that price over time. And one of the key things that is so important to think about is how you actually anchor that price. One of the folks that I've been lucky enough to work with, named Georgia, who's the founder of Expecting Together. It's a prenatal social club where parents are able to get together with other parents that are going through the same experiences that they are with their children that are about to be born. If they're all in the same city and they're all going through this same moment at that same time, they'll be able to form a tight-knit group, which this process is quite popular in Europe, but not so popular in the US. When Georgia and I first started talking together, we were thinking through pricing strategy and the feedback that she was getting from her customers. The most interesting feedback from this, though, was that many people were referencing hospital training for having a new baby. That hospital training through insurance can sometimes be extremely low. But when you looked at the value that Georgia and Expecting Together were actually providing for these couples, it was immense. The pricing strategy didn't necessarily match up with it, but also the anchoring techniques that she were using needed a little bit more refinement. That's why pricing is not a one and done deal. The beauty of a community, just like Georgia's, is that it will evolve and you can adjust your pricing over time based on data and feedback. In Georgia's case, she ran an initial survey and some people said, hey, this was very expensive. But other people said this was not priced nearly high enough. After your pilot, when you go on to full launch, you'll launch with the best information that you have because you did the data and you gathered these studies. But keep listening here. Watch your conversion rate. When it comes to having prospects become paid members, if tons of people that you talk to or see the offer probably perhaps say that you were a bit low, you could consider testing a higher price. Now, in other cases, I've talked with entrepreneurs and they've bragged to me about having an 80 or 100% close rate with a huge smile on their face. I tell them with as much affection as I can that that's not a brag, my friend, and they kind of outed themselves. What that shows me is that your prices are far too low. One example of a community owner that I've been speaking with, real statistics, were over a 7-day period, having 2,463 people visit their sales page. 54 of those people signed up, which equals a 2.19% conversion rate. Their community had been live for about a year at this point, and they had 1,131 paying members. That equals to over 100 grand of recurring revenue every single month. And it was a community that was $100 a month, and it was career coaching. In this case, their traffic came almost entirely from 5 to 15,000 view YouTube videos, and this person posted them once a week. On a qualified 2 or 3 call close of those people that make it to the final stage. But don't let me tell you what's good. I'm just a stranger on the internet. If you're closing close to 50% of your calls, just think about it. You might be priced a little bit too low. On the flip side, though, if a bunch of people are not converting and many people say that price is their main objection, consider upping the amount of perceived value and work on that packaging. You can also explore a discount, maybe 2 to 4 months off the monthly pricing, so long as they pay for a year upfront. That will also reduce your churn an immense amount, which is great. You'll also want to regularly monitor engagement and retention. School and many other platforms have a great feature where you could see how many people are engaging in your community. If people pay for 1 month and then leave, aka they churn, something is off. Either the value isn't there for the price, or you might not be attracting the right folks to your community. If churn is high, and high being anywhere between 15 to 30% is on the larger side of high, dig in. Send exit surveys and ask for reasons. If many people say yes, it was in fact the pricing, it might be worth adjusting or adding a lower tier option. If price is the issue, though, then your content and engagement might be, but that's a topic for another video. Now, as your community grows and you add more features, more content, you will be able to increase the price for new members. It's very common for you to start at a lower early bird price and raise it for later cohorts as the offering becomes more robust, more data driven, and more impactful. Just ensure that you grandfather the original members in if you promised that to them. New members coming in get the higher price because there's much more value and you have a proof of concept. This shows loyalty to those people that got started with you in the beginning. But also, you want to make sure rerun the Van Westendorp's pricing survey. Do it every quarter or two at least, especially as your audience continues to grow or change. You might find that as your brand trust increases, people are willing to pay more. Or if you tap into a new segment, their willingness could differ. Pricing research isn't one time. Big companies do it all of the time, and you could do it too, just at a little bit of a smaller scale. The key is always pair the data with the feedback, right? Pair the numbers with the qualitative insights. Together, they'll tell you if your price is hitting the mark or if it needs a tweak. Speaking of, here's the conclusion of that pricing model experiment that our friends Hamish and Andy did. And yes, they did get a couple of people who were willing to bargain with their life.
Not really. We had a few more over the next 2 hours.
People fall in love in mysterious ways. Loving can hurt. I've been spinning out the time.
Now, what I love most about this experiment is that it shows so clearly that the wrong price will have a dramatic effect on your results. But you got to give it to them. They stuck with it. And 5 hours later, they got results.
Payment complete. Wicked.
There you go, mate.
That's the best $2 I've ever spent.
There you go. Yeah, we think it's pretty good value.
I didn't think anyone would come in.
Now, you heard the Game of Thrones star himself. I didn't think anybody would come in. That might be where you're at. Why would anybody come in and join your community? Well, good news is by now, you should have a clear roadmap for your pricing for your paid community. You know how to calculate your costs and set a price floor for that sweet 80% margin. You know how to use that 4-question survey and find out exactly what your audience thinks. And you know how to combine those things and choose a great price. You even know how to test it and adjust it over time. And that is a serious advantage over most creators. Most of those folks are just throwing darts in the dark when it comes to pricing. So here's my challenge to you. Take action on this. Today or this week, sit down and list out your costs. Figure out your target price using that formula and understand how much your members are costing you per member. If you have an audience, whether they're big or small, ask them the questions. You'll be amazed about the insights that you get. Even a handful of responses can really show you if you're hitting the right ballpark or not. Getting your pricing right is not about squeezing money out of your community. It's about making sure that you can serve them for the long haul. One of the most common objections that I typically get when having these pricing discussions is for mission-driven entrepreneurs. It's hard for you to feel initially like you might be doing the right thing by charging people more. But not only will they be getting more value from the experience, the mission will continue because you will have a healthy profit margin that feeds your business oxygen that it needs to survive. If you're not charging enough, you will burn out and you will have to quit because it is not sustainable. When you charge more, then you also get to show up with energy. You get to invest more. You get to have better content. Everybody wins. They get that more value. You get paid and the community thrives. Now, here is your call to action. If you found this helpful, click share, send it to a friend. I'd also love to hear from you guys in the comments. Let me know what price ranges you're considering for your community or your high ticket community offering, or let me know any questions that you have about the process. I'm here to help. So what's the ultimate lesson? Don't trust strangers in YouTube videos on the internet. Don't guess. Use your data. Get to an 80 or even 95% margin and build the community of your dreams profitably. If you're curious about how to use margins and understand the best way for you to build your business, check out this video where I talk all about how to ensure that you can get those 85 to 90 or even 100% profit margins. I'll see you in the next one.